Whiskey Jason here, whiskey from the viewpoint of an American over here in Germany. Today I have my guest from England, Max. Introduce yourself.
Hey Jason, I'm Max Vaughan. I'm co-founder of White Peak Distillery here in Derbyshire, in the middle of England, and really pleased to be joining you for tonight's show, Jason.
Well, thank you very much. Now, I actually had to take a look at a map here to figure out where you are, which is very, very embarrassing. All right, so I have the nice little Google Maps here. The red little dot is where the White Peak Distillery is. And we have Birmingham, we have Leeds up there, Manchester, and so on. If we zoom in here, we can actually see it's nice. I've seen pictures of the river. I thought the first time I saw the distillery from the outside, it almost looked like standing beside Deanston Distillery up there in Scotland. But you got some interesting stuff going on there. So tell me a little bit about the distillery at the beginning and what you're doing. Vanna says before, hello from Austria. Pat is here and says hi. Heiko says, good evening, everyone. I'm ready to go. MTV says good evening. And we also have a hi, the Northern German hi here from Sven. So who are you and what gave you the crazy idea to start a distillery?
I'm basically a kind of lifelong, or adult lifelong, I should add, whiskey fan. So that's it's been a 30-year hobby or pastime. I wouldn't say I had kind of an encyclopedic knowledge of the whiskey sector. I just enjoy whiskey, enjoy drinking it with friends, enjoy the wide variety of whiskey. And I bumped into someone over a decade ago who was starting more of an urban distillery. And I just got home that evening and spoke to my wife, Claire, who's the co-founder of the distillery with me, and said, wow, I've just spoke to this guy starting a distillery in England. I'd love to do that. Why can't we do that? And that was kind of how it all started. And that, I guess, initial kernel of a dream never left me. And it took me about 5 years to build up enough information, understand the size of the ask, how on earth you start your own distillery, and then just, find the right space and time in my life. And of course, there's never the right time, or there's never a perfect time. But eventually in 2016, we just decided, well, we think we can do something interesting in an area of England where they've never made whiskey before, and life's pretty short. So maybe after 5 years, we need to, dive right in. And that's what we did.
All right. So the captain here from Berlin says good evening and cheers. Aaron says hello, everyone. Pat says the bottle looks very nice. We'll be talking about that in a second. Peter up here says good evening. Gerhard says a wonderful good evening. And Jan says, good evening, everyone. He's a little bit excited to find out what we have in our class tonight. So that's going to be good. So just a little bit of an overview. We're going to have a little bit of an introductory of the distillery with a virtual tour. We're going to then taste the whiskey. And at the end, we can have all the questions and answers that you have. So you can write them in German or English if you want to. All right. Cologne is here also with Heiko. Good to see you there. All right, very, very good. So should we start with the virtual tour?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess I'll just give a very brief introduction, Jason. I mean, you mentioned earlier where we are. So we're in the middle of England, just north of the city of Birmingham. I guess that's the biggest city around. We're in right on a river. It's called the River Derwent, and the area is called the Derwent Valley. It has a lot of interesting kind of industrial heritage. It's where some of the first cotton mills were founded in England, and used the river for its water power. So that dates back to the sort of 17th century. And we're at what used to be a former wire works, started in the 1870s, hence the brand name for our whiskey. And we've got a real sort of strong sense of place and of the kind of the industrial heritage that went before us, but also that kind of sense of people making things the proper way, made to last. Really kind of informs the way we think about the business. So we're in this old Wireworks, lovely building, lots of personality, great sort of story, and it's just a wonderful home. And for us, when we were setting up the distillery, we kind of had 2 or 3 criteria. One, selfishly, I'm from Derbyshire, I'm from this region. My wife and I, ideally wanted a kind of a commute that was maybe less than half an hour if we could find it. We wanted the distillery to be by a river. That was really a kind of a romantic view of, where the distilleries that we'd enjoyed visiting, and a kind of natural watercourse. And then thirdly, we wanted some old buildings that had some personality, had their own story, just would give an interesting place for people to visit, because it's very much a destination. So they're really kind of celebrating the craft of whiskey making. So that's our home in Derbyshire, in this area called the Derwent Valley, where this kind of industrial past meets the kind of beautiful countryside. So with that intro, I guess we can have a look inside via the kind of the virtual video that we've got.
All right, so you're going to narrate every once in a while. You can stop the video and just give us all the information you would like.
Yeah, so this is inside the building. I've mentioned it's well over 100 years old. We're just looking here at our dry goods area. This is where we mill or crush the grain, and mainly what we're making is single malt whiskey. Not all the time. I'll just pause at this point. So we've got our mill on the right hand side. That's a traditional 4-roller mill, and then directly in front you can see the malt. We use 2 varieties from maltsters in England. So we're not doing our own malting. We use English barley, and we get on the one hand the sort of larger 1-ton bags in the background. They have unpeated malt, and in the foreground, just on the left, you can see the 25 kilogram bags, and they have heavily peated malt. And our core expression, and this is what we make sort of 10 months of the year, is a lightly peated single malt. So we are combining those 2 different malts, 80% unpeated, broadly speaking, with 20% heavily peated. And that's going to help us produce our lightly peated single malt. In terms of process, we're using the traditional pot still batch process for making whiskey, and our batch uses nearly 0.7 tons of malt. It's actually a 0.6 ton mash tun, and we'll look at that shortly, but we've managed to kind of increase the size of the batch by about 10% because we had a bit of spare capacity within all our vessels. English malt, lightly peated by the time we've combined those 2, and then crushed and milled on site, which for us is important, having control over that grind size. So I'll just carry on. We're just going to swing around here very shortly, and we're going to stop by a refrigerator, actually, is the plan. So just here on the left hand side, the mill's stopped now, which is great. So this is our yeast fridge. One of the things that we really focus on here at the distillery, and I'll pause at this point, is the flavor that can be generated during fermentation. And that's a function of a number of factors, but certainly important within those is the yeast that you use. And back in the day, so going back 5 years now, we started doing trials working with local breweries in this area called Derbyshire, where we're based, and basically getting samples of spent brewer's yeast and pitching that in our fermentations. At the time, with different types of malt, different elements of peated and unpeated. But where we ended up, we were convinced we were getting some really interesting flavors and something unique by using some of this spent brewer's yeast. And we worked with a a local brewery. They're just 15 miles up the road. They're called Thornbridge. They're in that craft brewing world, but they're one of the bigger guys, certainly here in England. And they do an IPA. It's called Jaipur. And this is the yeast that's left over from the process of making Jaipur. So every week we go and collect some live spent brewer's yeast from this brewery, just 15 miles up the road. And we keep it in the fridge. And for certainly a week, 10 days, we can keep it nice and fresh. As it turns out, we get fresh yeast every single week. And this is what we're using in our fermentation. So that's the yeast bucket. And yeah, we keep it refrigerated for the week until we need it. Here in the main still house, we're going to go up onto the platform. It's about 2.5 meters off the ground, obviously to give us access to the top of the larger vessels. And yeah, there'll be equipment up there, which I'm sure everyone's familiar with. So I'll just pause at this point. We'll come talk about it more detail, but dead ahead are our 2 pot stills there directly in line. From this angle, those were handmade in Scotland, just outside Edinburgh, to our design. So we're looking there at the wash still. It's a 3,000 litre wash still, and then behind that there's a 2,100 litre spirit still, which we'll come back to. And on the right hand side are our fermentation vessels. And actually, we've just had another 4 fitted in this last month, which gives us at least the ability to double production. We're going to spin around, just start with the process. This is our mash tun. It's a semi-lauter tun. I mentioned earlier, it's got a 0.6 ton capacity in terms of dry malt, but we actually have a bit more space in there. So we're up to nearly 0.7 tons now. We do we use 3 waters. We have a 20-minute recirculation. So we're trying to make a relatively clear wort, hopefully to give us some of the fruit flavors that we're going to come on to taste in our whiskey. And we've messed around a bit with rate design. We won't go into that too much of that detail, but really just to try and make sure that we got to a point where we were really happy with the barley or the malt bed that we were forming here. And then these are the fermenters. These are insulated just to help with some a little bit of temperature control, and it's not dynamic, but it kind of helps with the rate of change. And these fill from the bottom up, so we're just in the process here of filling this fermenter. You can see that's some of the yeast floating on the surface there. So we pitch as the fermenters are filling, and then we do typically a 4 or 5 day fermentation, depending on the season. So at the moment we're on 5 days, and we produce about 3,000 litres of wort from our mash. And so we add yeast, and 5 days later we end up with round about an 8% wash or an 8% beer. So this is the point at which we're creating our alcohol. And as I said before, the combination of that relatively long fermentation, certainly in whiskey making, along with the spent brewer's yeast, is helping us to create some what we believe are really interesting flavors at this point. And then we go through a traditional double distillation process on the 2 pot still. So here we are looking back from the opposite angle. So we'll just wander over to the wash still. Like I said, it's notionally a 3,000 litre wash still. It's taking 3,300 litres these days. And this is more of a stripping still. So we're going to run this for about 7 hours. We run our stills fairly slowly. Currently we're running 1 shift, so we're not in any particular hurry. We'll run this down to about 2% alcohol. And yeah, beyond that, it's kind of the economic trade-off doesn't really work. Yeah, so that's the wash still, and then the very next business day, we'll do our spirit run. This still, we spend, and apologies from the glare from the window there, this still we spend more kind of, more sort of time and energy focusing on the shape. So it's got a relatively tall neck, it's got an upward sloping lie pipe, all of which are kind of requiring the spirit to work relatively hard and encourage some copper contact, some reflux, which is going to produce let's say a cleaner spirit, a relatively clean spirit, relatively fruit forward, capturing some of those flavors that we've created during fermentation. And we bottle everything on site. So down on the right hand side there's our bottling shed. But we're just going to walk around now and have a look at our spirit safe, which is, again, I'm sure many of you have seen these before. This is a 200-odd-year-old design, but it works pretty well. So, and this is a collection point for the spirit that's coming off the stills. And there, actually, in the collection bowl, you can just see it coming off the spout. That's the heart cut of our new make. We've got a relatively tight cut on our hearts. So we collect hearts about an hour and a half, something like that, of the total spirit run. Yeah, I mean that's a 7-day process. We're just underneath the platform here, and I guess just wanted to kind of really just very briefly show you that there's no real automation in our distillery. There's a lot of flow plates, a lot of valves. The distillers using stopwatches and hydrometers and thermometers. Very much a manual process. We really wanted to celebrate the craft of making whiskey, and also make it an interesting place to work. So yeah, this is just a kind of wander through the back office. Those fermenters we were staring down at are on our left-hand side, and the mash tun is now dead ahead. And we're just going to wander outside very briefly. I mentioned before that we're on a river, and this is it. This is the River Derwent. And one of the really nice things about what we've been able to do here at this former Wireworks is this kind of platform that we're looking at dates back to, we think, the 1920s. And the Wireworks, when they were producing their cable and wire products, used to use the river water for cooling. And so we do exactly the same thing. So the cooling source for our condensers for distilling is our local watercourse. So on the left-hand side is the extraction pipe. We've got a pump that's about 2 or 3 meters below surface. And then on the right-hand side, you can see that water flowing back into the river. And that's the return from the cooling system. So we have a permit from the Environment Agency to use the river. And it's a really nice, sustainable way of producing cooling. And it's just really neat that we've been able to repurpose some of the heritage, some of the infrastructure that we inherited from the Wireworks. And then finally, here are some whiskey casks. This is, we use a traditional dunnage store. We'll talk a little bit more around casks in a while. We've filled about 1,800 so far. This year we're going to fill about 450. So we're producing about 60,000 LPA. And then, we'll come more to talk about the bottle. This happens to be an image of our first release. But I think we're all done there, Jason, on the video.
Excellent, thank you. I don't know of any other distilleries that use spent brewer's yeast. Do you? That's very unique, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's relatively unique. I think historically that was more the case. So in years gone by, it was not uncommon. And then, I guess a lot of dry yeasts that are typically now used by distilleries have been engineered in a lab to be very good at converting sugar into alcohol effectively. And they're also, dry yeast is much easier to store. So, if your distillery is, a long way from the supply chain, you can have it delivered, once every kind of 3 months, and it can be kept and utilized when you need it. The challenge with spent brewer's yeast is you need to get it when it's fresh, and it doesn't stay fresh for much more than 10 days. So it's relatively uncommon. I'm aware of only a small handful of other distilleries, craft distilleries, that are doing this. Certainly larger scale, it becomes more challenging, but the scale we're operating at, it's not about mass production, it's about flavor. And for us, having this link between the whiskey heritage in our area, which only started with us back in 2016, and the brewing heritage, which goes back 300 years, is a nice part of the story, as well as a key focus for flavor.
Excellent. So we have a couple more new people in. Bozio says hello. Tobias was here. Wow, another cool tour. Great. Now, Aaron did see a hybrid still in the background. That must be for the gins and for the vodkas, right?
Yeah. So we do make gin, and we continue to make that. Even now we've launched our whiskey. So the first whiskey bottling we did in February this year. But the gin has helped us locally, certainly with some cash flow. And it's also helped with the distillery tours, because until this year, we've been running tours since 2018. Obviously, the pandemic put a bit of a halt to proceedings, but and on those tours, they're way more interesting when people have got some spirits to drink. So certainly making our own gin kind of helped with that in the early days. We also make our own rum, and we make that from scratch as well. So that hybrid still, actually, it's made by a company called Carl from Germany, is a pot still with a side column. So for the gin, we just use still without the column, and then for the rum, we do a bit of both. So the whiskey stills are exclusively for our whiskey. Now they've been seasoned, but we have that additional still for those two other spirits.
All right. Tobias was looking at the website and said, hey, you offer tours on Thursdays and Fridays at 11 and at 2 p.m. So I guess he's going to have to book a tour when he's there next year. Will you be expanding, or will it exactly stay on those 2 days next year? What are the plans?
So we also do tours on a Saturday. Those are our most popular. So at the moment, we do 3 tours on a Saturday. Again, on our website, those are 11 in the morning, 12:30 in the afternoon. And then we do what we've just introduced in the last few months, what we call our whiskey tour, which is 2 o'clock on a Saturday. And we also run those tours on the odd Friday. And the whiskey tour is a much deeper dive into whiskey making for those that are interested. So we just spend more time talking about things like malting, talking about fermentation. You get to taste the wort. And so for people that are, a bit more interested in their whiskey making, that's a really popular tour. In fact, I don't know definitively, but it's generally sold out kind of 6 weeks in advance. But we're putting another tour on. So if anyone is planning to come to the UK, we are starting a warehouse tour. End of January is the plan. And that will be then a weekly thing on a Saturday at 3 o'clock. And that will be based in our main cask storage area. You will be sat there with warm clothing, so it's not a heated space, but we'll be sampling some whiskey straight from the cask, and that will happen with the group kind of dynamically. So we'll be pulling it out the cask with a whiskey thief, and again, that's intended to hopefully just add a bit more interest for the whiskey enthusiast.
Excellent. Now let's talk very briefly about this bottle, because this bottle is beautiful. I mean, you have the lines coming up here, and that little twistedness reminds me of wire. I think that was something you wanted to go for as well, and got the nice little tag here with the little information here. And we have number 3. This is small batch. So these are custom made bottles just for you, right?
Yeah, that's right. So we kind of felt it was important. We believe we're making a premium single malt whiskey, and we wanted it to be presented in premium packaging. So we were lucky enough to find a really great glass manufacturer just 70 miles, so about 100 kilometers north of the distillery. And then we spent, well, almost 18 months in the end designing the bottle and the label. And really, we wanted it to try and tell the story to some extent of the Wireworks where we're based. You know, I mentioned before that we've got a really strong sense of place. We obviously, you know, completely understand that not everyone's going to be able to visit the distillery, but hopefully with that bottle, it is a, yeah, it's a metaphor. It's you know, it's supposed to be a kind of an object that looks like a cable or a wire unwinding, yeah. And it's got this kind of those strands which really kind of speak to the kind of the approach we adopt towards flavor in our distillation. So yeah, it's a really very much a sort of a nod to where the distillery is based. Yeah, and we've been delighted. It's been really well received. You know, obviously the most important thing is that the whiskey tastes good, but I think people have, you know, enjoyed pouring from that bottle and having that bottle at home. We won the Contemporary Design Award from the IWSC this year. So, you know, absolutely delighted with the way that's worked for us. So, yeah, we think we're proud of that. I think it tells a little bit of our backstory and, you know, presents our whiskey, we think, in an interesting, in the right way.
Well deserved. I think this is one of the most beautiful bottles I've seen in a very, very long time. Well done there. All right, so we're going to now come to the tasting part. We in Germany have at the moment one single bottle available. So we're working on getting more bottles over here. That's going to happen in the meanwhile. I'll show you the shop that is actually now the importer here for you in Germany. It is here Klaus Pickenels together with you, and we have the number 3 small batch. We have a single malt. It is English whiskey. Your name of the distillery is White Peak, but the name of the whiskey is Wireworks. And it's 72 euros over here. And we are talking about 46.2%, no coloring, no chill filtration, and 0.7 liters at the moment is what we have, just number 3. But if we take a look at your website, you have at the moment, I think you have, let me take a look here real quick with you. So if we go over to your place, your shop here, you have 5, which is sold out, 6, which is available, 7, which is sold out, and 8, which is still available. So there might be new bottles coming sometime soon to continental Europe, I hope, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the plan, Jason. You know, this is our... Germany is actually our first export market. You know, we're really pleased to be working with Klaus at Pickenels. You know, he's shown a real interest in what we were doing. You know, he came over to see us pre-pandemic. You know, that was a long time before we technically had any whiskey. And so, yeah, it's early days, but we are, you know, we've got, you know, great hope for our whiskey in Germany, and certainly, you know, the plan would be certainly in 2023 to try and get most of our releases over there. So yeah, so this is the I guess one of our releases from this year, but it also, I think, it's a really good representation of our house style. I think that's, you know, one of the reasons why we were able to get some of this to Klaus. I think it does offer a good insight into generally the style of whiskey we're making. And so, yeah, hopefully a good starting point, but there will be more to come next year.
Excellent, excellent. Now, this was a mixture of STR casks and ex-Bourbons. Now, almost every place that has STR, somehow Dr. Jim Swan was involved. Is that true for you as well?
So No,
Okay, great.
but I'll caveat that slightly. So Dr. Jim Swan, actually, to me personally, was really helpful. So I mentioned at the start that it kind of took us 5 years to plan the business, and this is going to sound extraordinary, but one of the things that Jim helped me with was build a financial model, because I didn't really know what all the inputs were and all the how do you kind of characterize all the costs, and what does this economic business case look like. So Jim helped me with some of those things, and then just about the time when we were getting going with designing and engineering the distillery, he was certainly busy at that time helping a number of distilleries, and we had we had lots of reasons to carry on using Jim and working with Jim, but he was a busy guy. But also, I guess I had some concerns that Jim was providing lots of great advice to a number of distilleries, and I just wondered whether there may be a kind of risk that we end up producing the same whiskey as everybody else. So in the end, we didn't use Jim in any kind of formal way in terms of the engineering and the spirit style and the actual process. But he was really, really helpful to me personally in just trying to develop a plan, which ultimately I decided was a good plan, and we managed to find a few investors that felt the same. So Jim sadly died, not long after we commissioned the distillery, which is a sad day. He was very influential for a whole number of distilleries, and personally helped me a lot.
So over here, Oliver says, "Greetings from Bielefeld, which is in Germany. The sample smells very interesting. Let's try the small batch number 3."
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. So, but Jason mentioned briefly, just in terms of casks, so we used 2 different types of casks here. So this is a vatting of 14 casks. Broadly speaking, about 75% are STR casks. So shaved, toasted, re-charred casks that were previously used for red wine maturation. And then the other 25% are ex-Bourbon barrels that we source from Heaven Hills Distillery in Kentucky. And we're pleased to be able to source those direct. It gives us just a little bit more comfort on that kind of supply chain side of things, and the fact we're getting fresh, unadulterated barrels. So it's a vatting of those 2 cask styles. I mentioned at the start we're making a lightly peated spirit, and that wasn't we didn't want to be sort of necessarily characterized as making peated whiskey. For us, the light peating was about flavor, about some background complexity. I personally really enjoy some of the lightly peated single malts. There aren't that many around. There's certainly no one else in England doing this as their core style. So that's what's in the bottle, this lightly peated spirit. As Jason mentioned, just a nudge over 46% ABV, and was actually, this is the release that has kind of managed to kind of get the best awards of any releases we've had so far. So this won what's called a Masters Award at the Global World Whisky Masters. So basically for whiskey that's not from Scotland, all those the kind of the big 4, and I think very, very kind of indicative of our house style. So let's give it a nose.
Yeah. And anyone that wants to write their nosing aromas here in the chat, feel free to do so. It's almost like a chocolate malt moment.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think there's that kind of yeah, almost like a fudge, maybe
Go for
chocolate.
fudge. I think that's a good word.
Yeah, kind of chocolate, sort of vanilla. I think there's some fruit in there, some orchard fruit, which for some people will be kind of apple. Also, maybe some dried fruits in that kind of raisin and kind of sultana type category. Not a lot kind of giving away any of that light peat I was talking about. So it's not like that kind of Isla peat, which is instantly identifiable.
No iodine.
It's much more subtle than that. So maybe maybe a bit of kind of that kind of fruit cake, a bit of kind of maltiness. But very for us, well-rounded, and certainly those characteristics that we're trying to develop during fermentation, we can start to see coming through on the nose here.
So I do know that Roy from Aquavita loves your products. He's had a couple bottles already, and every time he has it in the show, he does show the bottle, pour something, and talk about that. So one of my heroes over there up in Glasgow from the YouTube channel. Aaron asks, we are in Germany now. We do have bottles, but what about the US? What about the plans to conquer the world?
Yeah, I mean, kind of, one step at a time for us. But I think, we certainly, got aspirations to grow the business. The US, is certainly a big market. It's also kind of challenging structurally. But I think in the short term, we want to be sort of selective about the markets that we're working in, the people that we're working with. We feel very strongly that we want to have a business where we enjoy working with all the people that we're working with, and also to be able to provide the support. We're a pretty small team, and I guess as gratifying as it might be to ship pallets all around the world, we'd rather kind of be a little bit more selective. Hopefully, work in countries, such as Germany, where we would plan to be certainly at a couple of the major whiskey festivals and provide that right level of support. So that's kind of going to be the approach on the export front. But I'll be totally honest. We still got quite a lot of demand here in the UK to satisfy as well. So the export journey is important, but we're not going to charge at too many markets in the short term.
Very, very wise, especially if you're laying down only 500 barrels a year, basically, right?
Yeah. I mean, it seems like a lot to us at the moment, but I guess in the scheme of things.
I have distilleries in the States that are doing that in less than a week.
No, I can imagine. Different ball game.
Exactly. And so we want to talk about world domination. You do need to have a little bit deeper stocks and maybe even not just one shift a day, maybe 2 or 3, who knows, right?
Yeah, that'll be some sleepless nights.
I know, I'm sorry. Growth pains.
So maybe we should try a little bit.
Let's get back to the whiskey. Let's talk about now, all right? Very good. So, Solange, all the best to you. As I mentioned, that fudge chocolatey, but also a little bit of the smokiness. Is this peat from England, or where does the peat come from?
Yeah, so the peat is actually from Scotland. I think
the Highlands from someplace probably.
Yeah. The reality is it needs to be kind of managed and I guess farmed in a sustainable and careful way, and certainly that's more possible in Scotland than it is in England. So I'm pretty sure anyone that's producing any whiskey with whatever the element of peat is here in England, ultimately the origin of that peat will be Scotland. But no, for sure. So certainly on the palate, you start to pick up just that light peating I mentioned before. It's more about background complexity. It certainly continues on the finish, but that's I guess a nice surprise that because it doesn't necessarily come out on the nose, but it provides some interesting complexity.
There's a nice fruitiness, almost like a candied orange going on in there. That's very nice.
Well, that's really interesting because I'd say the same thing, Jason. Definitely candied orange, kind of marmalade, and we didn't didn't go into a lot of detail on those STR casks that we're using, but there's the STR cask is not a single generic cask. So we've actually got a family of STR casks. So we work with the cooperage in Porto, in Portugal, and a number of our STR casks, we've had the heads or the ends that were originally made from American oak. We've had them replaced in French oak. And so you can imagine the kind of surface area of the cask was, in the first instance, 100% American oak. By the time you swap the heads out to French oak, you're probably talking around 15% of the surface area. In all honesty, I've not done the maths. But that French oak...
I'm sure John Glazer did the math back then with his spice tree at the very beginning, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. But that kind of French oak, it imparts some different flavors to American oak.
Spiciness that I like. Very nice.
Exactly right. And I think that kind of that zestiness, the orange, the kind of marmalade, we're kind of attributing some of that to the fermentation, but then the way it develops alongside the French oak, and I think it complements the peat well also.
Yeah, I do too. So Jan, who has a sample here, says sweet, a little pepper, a little smoke and leather, grain, some red fruit. Can't exactly tell what it is. Almost candy-like. Pretty good. Very good. Thank you, Jan.
Yeah, thanks, Jan. No, we'll take pretty good. And I kind of certainly recognize pretty much everything you've noted down there.
Now this is number 3. At the moment you have number 8. Will you go up to 100 and start over again? What's your plan? Will there be a core range?
Yeah, so the plan is we will have a core range. I mean, it might take a while for the size of that core range to be a range, but we're kind of honing in on what we think will be a regular core bottling, and it won't be a long way away from this, in all honesty, in terms of a regular core. And then we've got this year we've done a whole range of interesting things, partly for us as almost like a part of our educational. It's a journey for us too. So understand, what does our spirit taste like in these different cask environments? What do people think of it? So we've done a variety of things this year, but we probably won't continue with 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 ad infinitum. I think it's been a good way to differentiate between what we've done this year. But isn't necessarily something that we've got plans to stick with forever and a day. I mean, certainly the bottle's the bottle, and the label design, we've got no plans to change any of that up. But we expect to have sort of 2 or 3 core bottlings. If it's not next year, we'll be sort of honing in on that pretty closely during next year.
Excellent. Very, very good. So you do have some interesting casks there. You have virgin oak, you have rum, you've had some other interesting casks as well there. STR Bourbon, stout you've used as well. What are some of the more unusual things we might be able to expect the next 2 to 3 years?
Yeah, I think the stout that you mentioned is really interesting for us. There's other distilleries have done stout finish, so it's not necessarily novel, but what's really interesting for us is that the stout barrels that we use are from the same brewery from where we get the spent yeast. So they make a stout that's called Necessary Evil. it's a 13% imperial stout. But because of that kind of strength of character, it works really well as a stout finish for our whiskey. So yeah, we've done this stout finish. It was called a necessary evil finish because the stout was called necessary evil. But it really kind of, I guess it kind of closes the loop on the provenance, the regional provenance of the whiskey we're making, because we started off, fermenting the alcohol using the spent brewer's yeast from this brewery, and then we finished the whiskey in their stout cask. So that's for us is a lovely way of kind of capturing the essence of where we're based. But it's also been really well received. So we've got another stout finish actually underway now. We finished for just over 9 months, and so we're getting ready for probably next September's bottling. What's quite interesting about next year's stout finish is the stout itself was matured in PX casks. So now we've refilled those. So yeah, there's a little bit of an interesting kind of family story there. PX sherry used for stout maturation for 9 months, and it's now got our whiskey in.
Great. Now this is 46.2%. So you decided to do non-chilled filtered, never color added, I guess. Why 0.2? You could have gone 0.3 and been confused with distill. You could have gone 0.4, been totally unique. What's so significant about 46.2?
Yeah, I mean, look, we do they go through the usual process internally. We try and decide what this particular bottling is, how it's going to be presented at different ABVs, and for us, that kind of roundabout the low 46s, we just felt like the way that it would kind of demonstrate all the flavors that we wanted to people. But then, to be totally honest, I don't like round numbers. So, it was kind of, well, round about, 46-ish, feels right. But let's pose the question by bottling at 46.2. So yeah, it's, would it have tasted any different at 46.3 or 46.1? Probably not. But yeah, that was where it came from.
See, I did not realize. I just have to apologize because your autumn number 6 release was a different ABV. So there you were at 47.7. So you vary almost with every batch at the moment still, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think we haven't had the same ABV on anything. So we've just done a rum cask finish. I think that was 57.2. That was actually cask strength. We did a virgin oak finish about a month ago. That was 51.7. So far in the main, they've been over 50. But actually, we're sort of, with this particular type of vatting, the STRs and the bourbon, we're favouring that kind of mid to high 40s.
Excellent. Very, very interesting. So this is always a batch, and you're just finding the best possible taste here to deliver to us, the consumer. So it's very flavor driven, the whole enterprise.
Yeah, absolutely. And it may well be, Jason, that in the future, as the spirit matures and we're dealing with older casks, that the flavor that's being sort of developed just requires us to revisit the ABV whenever we do the bottling. So that that may well be the case for the next 2 or 3 years. I guess at some point for the core range, we'll probably land on something that we stick with. But yeah, it's more about, well, what do we think works best in terms of flavor for this particular batch? Like I said before, it's not mass production. We're a relatively small distillery, so we can take a real hard, close look at every single batch that we make.
And you probably know most of the casks all really by name, and you know what's in them. And when you do the bottling, it's still hand bottled, isn't it? You don't have a 20,000 bottles per hour bottling line.
No, we don't. Not at the moment. It's still, yeah. Well, actually, we don't even have a labeling machine that work. This bottle and label combination.
It is a little unique. It starts here and goes all the way around once, which makes it a pain in the butt for a machine, I think, right?
You're absolutely right. And so this year, in round terms, we will have bottled and labeled around about 20,000 bottles. Every single label's been applied by hand, so it's hand finished.
Exactly. Wow, that's great. So people are watching now. If you have any questions, please ask them now. So Tobias has the most annoying question always, except for your own whiskey. What is your most famous whiskey otherwise? Your favorite?
The favorite, yeah. The first answer I'll give is I like a whole range of whiskies, and really kind of depends on the mood. So, for example, I'm not a massive fan of heavily peated whiskey, but I do like a heavily peated whiskey from time to time, but probably just one in an evening. But if I had to pick a whiskey, and this is more to do with the story of the distillery, it would be Bruichladdich on Islay. I mean, they produce at the distillery some really heavily peated malts. Octomore, springs to mind. But I actually like their unpeated single malt. But Bruichladdich, for those that don't know the story, nearly went bust, and it was kind of almost like a phoenix from the flames kind of resurrection when Mark Rainier and a group of his investors took the distillery over. Obviously, he's the guy behind Waterford. But yeah, he did a great job in terms of turning around the fortunes of that distillery. And I actually own a cask there that I bought with my brother in 2006, and it's still sat up there, so it's doing pretty well. So that, yeah, I'm slightly biased because of that, but I just love the distillery. It's kind of rooted in those traditions. And it had that sense in which it was kind of it was almost on its knees, but someone has brought it back and done a great job with it.
That is true. That is true. So a little bit like the factory you're in now. It was also basically, and it's been resurrected from the ashes, huh?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of slightly different life, but we'll take that.
Excellent. Now, Max, this is very exciting what you're doing there. This is going to be a lifelong project. Do you have your kids? Have you been training them to be the next master distillers, or what's the plan there?
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I think, I'm certainly a big believer in them kind of finding whatever their passion is in life. Making whiskey, for Claire and I and our small team, it's been an incredible journey, very enjoyable, but it's hard work, right? It's not an easy business to get into, and so if you don't feel passionate about what you're doing, then I just don't know how you'd get on with it. So I guess I'd encourage my kids to do whatever they want to do, but do something they feel that they feel strongly enough to make a success of. So yeah, we'll see. For the time being, I'm just focusing on trying to continue to make the best whiskey we can and get it out there to as many people who are interested in what we're doing. And frankly, that's going to keep me busy for further into the future than I can see.
So I just want to share very briefly. This is website, our story, meet the team. So we have you, we have your wife.
Yeah.
So we have here a distillery manager. We have a distiller, which I love. It's just not the guys, but also the guys and the girls. So you have your regional sales manager, your accountants here. You have here your whiskey ambassador, Tom. You have the marketing, and you have a couple other interesting people here working also behind the scenes here, right?
Yeah, so there's 12 of us now, and it's a whole mixture of people. I guess it's common for a lot of distilleries. Once you get going, you realize that you need more people in other roles than people who make whiskey. But yeah, everyone's super excited. They've certainly, in the case of Dave, our distillery manager, he's been with us since we commissioned the distillery, so he's been around for every single drop of whiskey that we've ever laid down. And yeah, it's exciting times, and that's the kind of I guess the way the team feels about the future prospects.
Well, Max, I wish you all the best for this distillery. I'll be following, watching, and maybe even trying some of your juice every once in a while. I thoroughly enjoyed this. There's a nice fruitiness to it that I really think the longer fermentation really helps here. It's just not the short fermentation, though. You said 4 to 5 days of the fermenting here, and you're using a very special yeast. And I really, really do think that affects this whiskey in a very, very positive way. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for the insights here into your distillery. And if anyone's close by, please visit the distillery. Please sign up for the newsletter as well, so you know what's going to happen. And if you're looking for anything in Germany, a couple different shops have it already. And the one place you can always go would be Pickernell's. And they definitely have what you're looking for, as they are the importer here of this brand for Germany. So Klaus, thank you very much for sending me the bottle and making this happen as well. And the last words are for you now, Max.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Well, look, thanks to everyone that's joined us live this evening or are going to be watching this subsequently. Yeah, it's been great to have an opportunity to talk about the distillery, the whiskey that we're making, just kind of share some of our passion, and yeah, we certainly look forward to hopefully seeing a few of those folk online, either at a festival soon in Germany, or maybe even over here in England. The doors to distillery, apart from Sundays at the moment, they're generally always open. So yeah, you'd be very welcome to come and see us. But Jason, just finally to thank you again for giving us the opportunity to to kind of share what we're doing. I really appreciate you investing some of your time in in helping us spread the word. So thank you.
Thank you very much. All the best here. And Henrik, I missed out. Yes, you did. But you can watch a replay. And Tobias says, thanks, Max.
Thanks, Tobias.
All right. Bye-bye.